So I wanted to talk a little bit about small blind versus big blind play. Just go through kind of what happens in the GTO model and also talk about what you can do versus the population. I actually think this is a situation that most people are playing relatively, they're not making enough, right? Either by not limping in enough or they're not raising enough versus limps. There's a lot of money to be made in this spot in particular. And I'm just going to go through GTO strategy for blind versus blind with an emphasis on shapes and patterns, right? Apologies for the watermark, but yeah, small blind, 10 big blinds first in. I was just looking at this, like a bunch of heads up stuff, and basically you can turn your whole strategy into limp or shove with like 15 big blinds or less in position, but out of position has a big raising range. Totally got distracted there though. This has been tested. We don't have a raising range. We have a polarized limping range. And yes, we are limp calling all in with Queen 7 suited. Shoving the middle, that has to do a lot of with these high card hands, and then limping the trash on the outside. In game, with 10 bigs, you have to be a bit cautious, limping much wider than this, but you can still limp all suited hands, I think. And obviously the reason why limping is preferable in a lot of ways is that it allows you to VPIP more hands than shoving. Now looking at 15 big blinds, the shoving range is reduced. Less hands can get a lot of EV out of shoving. The first time I ever ran a sim for 15 big blinds, it had more shoving range than this, and it was quite polarized, but we didn't actually have a raising range. But in this sim, there seems to be a bit of a raising range that's sort of built around aces. I think it really depends on who's in the blinds, because if they're overfolding, you can just start by raising everything, of course. And that's what we'll get to later on, is that these are all models that you're supposed to kind of adjust based on who you're playing against. Anyway, the shoving range, ace X, high king X, this sort of C-shaped shoving range, very polarized limping range. Now with the small blind, with 20 big blinds, the shoving range has pretty much been reduced to 2s through 5s, king, queen, and ace 2 through ace jack. I mean, they're all these. I really don't pay too much attention to these. And now with 20 bigs is when the raising range comes in. But the way I think about the raising range here is that we are raising somewhat polar, like lots of blockers. And then like hands that can't really make straights, suited hands, but not the very worst for some reason. So we're still limping in with the very worst. And with 20 bigs plus, we're always kind of limp shoving ace queen and ace king. Now 20 big blind shoving range, obviously if you're playing your whole range shoving, I feel like this is for sure not the best way to play.